The guest today that we have, he's just a powerhouse in the home service space.
It always starts with marketing, always starts with lead gen.
Has there been a series of different issues you've seen contractors dealing with in terms of the size of their organizations?
So I break it into 3 tiers.
What are the natural trends that you're seeing now in marketing?
I always suggest a 10% advertising budget.
Expand on that when a contractor has a high allowable cost per lead, but they're not maximizing it because they're only spending half.
Well, the biggest factor there is
The proven pipeline performance program that you created. Why should people use it?
once they implemented these processes and started working on their business, that's when they took off.
Welcome to Beers with Contractors.
All right, tradies, another episode of Beers with Contractors. Happy Thursday to you guys. Terry, cheers to you, sir.
Cheers.
Listen, before you make any snide comments about my shirt today, I'm going to be very clear about something because I know you're already building them up. But
There's a list.
I wore this shirt today specific to our guest and somebody that I really admire. And for the nearly 2 decades that I've known him, every time I see him, he's in a colorful shirt. They're always bright and vibrant. They're well pressed. And then we get on today, and I'm the only idiot sitting here in a floral Hawaiian shirt. But you know what? It's coming up on the summer. Well, actually, by the time this episode airs, we will be in summertime. It's time to start breaking out the baby powder, Terry.
Oh, it is getting hot, and pool season's opening up, and sunburns are just around the corner.
Oh, dude. Yep. I'm loving it. So, well, okay. Hey, before we get started, you guys know the routine. Like, subscribe. All 6 of you out there. 6 listeners. We appreciate you guys every week, but also new subscribers. Lake Bruce, Jan Carlos, Jonathan Brito, Master Kello, Cheryl's, and then Bobby Thomas. Thanks for subscribing. We appreciate you guys. We'll keep the content coming. All right, Terry, you already saw the bio and writing for this mystical being that we brought on the show today, which I love because his resume is massive, and I tried my best not to really screw it up. But from a contractor's perspective, I mean, the depth of knowledge this guy has, I think there's just so much that we could dive into. We could make this a 2-parter today, and if we have to, heck, we will. The guest today that we have, he's just a powerhouse in the home service space. Hell, he's got like 25 years and growing just helping contractors. He's worked behind the scenes with some of the most well-known dealer networks around. Some of you listening probably heard the Basement Systems, Clean Space, Foundation Support Works, Dr. Energy Service Networks, which have grown into franchise networks and everything else. It's wild. 10 years ago, he started his own Global Growth Network division, and that's a consultancy and marketing firm that dedicated to help contractors generate more leads. And who the hell here doesn't want more leads, right? But also that's both business to business and business to consumer, so you don't see that often. And then also the creator of a proven pipeline performance program, which we're going to dive in today and learn more about that. But also, when you don't think there's enough, he also wrote a book, Your Business Pipeline, Roadmap to Entrepreneurial Success, where he teaches how each department should function like a pipeline in the customer journey. By the way, my book is on the way. I was embarrassed to know that I typically like to read the books, Terry, before we get going. But it is in my UPS's hands right now. And then, oh, wait, there's one more. And it's like an infomercial, Terry. But wait, there's more.
More.
Because the guy doesn't have enough time on his hands. He also has a nonprofit called American Dreams Realized, which provides grants and mentorships to help young entrepreneurs launch their business the right way. Woo! And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Our guest today, Dan Fitzgerald. Dan, welcome to the show, buddy. Cheers to you, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Now, Dan, first thing, I need you to go up, go out of your studio, go get a shirt, and then come back, and then we're going to reshoot. No, I'm joking. Just know that I love it. And also, I love the fact that you were like, well, I wanted to look professional today, but I always thought you looked professional every day anyway.
Thank you, Will.
Harry and I are the ones you got to look for. But I know that was a lengthy introduction. I mean, obviously, we've known each other a long time, 25 years. Man, what's the moment in the last 25 years that you woke up and said, man, this is it. This is my calling?
Well, it was really the evolution of watching mostly family-run businesses. And oftentimes those owners would pass the business down to their kids over the years. And just watching their lives transcended with this, following the programs and the success that they've had, That was really it. I mean, and you've got hundreds of these companies that are all just living lives that they never dreamed they could. And that's the rewarding part.
Now, Dan, you've built basement systems and foundation support works. You've worked with these large organizations. What are some of the experiences that have helped you shape how you're coaching them as independent contractors?
Well, realistically, they weren't large at the beginning. So that's the story. That's the evolution. When these guys started, I mean, they were just contractors and they knew their core discipline, but they learned the rest as we all learned together over the years as we grew. The marketing side, the call capture side, the sales side, those are the areas that they weren't as aware of. So as they grew and got better at the processes, it's figuring out the processes in their companies. And that's kind of what I wrote my book about. But that's what happened is once they implemented these processes and started working on their business instead of toiling in it, that's when they took off. And then they became, as you mentioned, they became these 900-pound gorillas in their marketplace. I mean, industry leaders, and many of them have sold their companies at this point for generational wealth.
Your experience in these networks, which were specialty contractors, which is not fancy at all, have now grown into a multi-billion-dollar set of networks. This isn't like million with an M, it's billion with B's. And it's like, these are massive. And I think one of the things that I experienced with that was like the amount of systems and processes that you guys were able to develop that was just plug and play. You know, what was the first system and process you started to work on heavily to start that flywheel from turning?
Well, it was my industry, which was advertising and marketing and lead generation. I mean, that was the core, because without the leads, they couldn't grow the business. So it was really delving in and of course creating an internet presence that was, second to none. And that was the initial growth. From there, again, it goes back to the concepts in my book, which is each department has its own growth strategies. So the only way that these guys could grow and build their companies to, 50, 60 plus $1 million a year in consumer sales is to be able to have the weakest link in their company be taken care of. So it's every department. They were able to look at KPIs in every department and really develop strategies that were second to none. So that was really it. It starts with marketing. It always starts with marketing, always starts with lead gen.
Well, I remember the first time I met you, Dan. Well, to be clear, I met you from being in a crowd. You walked up on the stage. I was at a conference, and I think this had to have been 20 years ago. And you walked up in front of a bunch of contractors. You said, "Hey, by the way, guys, I want you to know that I think this internet thing is going to be really big." And we all practically started throwing our Yellow Pages books at him, like, well, you don't know a fucking thing. Anyway, it's like, and now it's like you can't survive without it. So now we're fast forwarding into 2025. Like, what are some of the natural trends that you're seeing now in marketing where it's like, hey, this is the next big thing, and everybody's throwing their Google and LSA pages at you? What are you seeing there?
Well, we're at the cusp of the next evolution. And honestly, we really don't know exactly what it's going to be yet, because AI is going to change search. And it's beginning to now. Google is still, the major player, and Bing still falls second. But I mean, just picture what's going to happen in a few more years with AI when everybody will have their own ability to get inquiries answered. How's that going to change search? What's going to happen with people looking for services? So the key is we've got to stay on the cutting edge of everything that's happening right now. Everything right now is still social media. It's still Google, paid advertising in a multitude of areas. There's lead aggregators, but the problem with lead aggregators is they're building their brands and not the contractor's brand. So you've got to be careful with those. I mean, there's a lot of places to generate leads, but, I'm into prioritizing. We want to start with the low-hanging fruit, and we want to build our own brand. And I still think that that's the key, to growth in a market, is having a dominant brand that everybody knows. And the key there is that if you've got a brand in your marketplace that's a household name, you'll generate referrals from people that don't know you, that have never used you. And that's the key. That's the key to that exponential growth. We were talking about these huge companies that have built themselves, as you say, to, $60 million in annual sales. Everybody knows them. Everybody knows them in their marketplace. So when you get to that point, all your advertising works better and your referral base is through the roof.
Now, Dan, in your book, your business pipeline, you compare different departments to flowing pipes. Why are you using that metaphor, and why is it so effective for contractors?
The whole idea of the book and that concept is that contractors don't think of their business that way. They think of their business as, my core discipline, what I do, what I'm good at, and then they think I need leads and I need to sell jobs. And that's all kind of one component. So it's kind of production and sales is mostly what a contractor will think of when they look down at their business. What I wanted to do with the pipes is get them to understand that there's more departments than that in your company, whether you know it or not, and they actually flow into each other. So by starting with, as I say, the marketing pipe, right, is the pipe that leads the show. Without leads, there's no sales, right? Without sales, there's no revenue. So the marketing pipe is where the dollars come in, and that we've got to look at return on investment there. So we've got to be careful with our spend. We've got to know, where to allocate our budget so that we're going to get the best return on investment. But that marketing pipe flows into a call center pipe. A lot of contractors don't think about this. I mean, young contractors and small guys have the phone ringing to their cell phone. So, I mean, we've got to really build and educate across the board that we need to be able to capture all of those leads. We need to be able to convert those into scheduled appointments. And if we don't, we have to follow them up. So, and then those appointments flow into sales, and so forth. So I think that pipe analogy is a good one. And it really gets the contractors to look at their business differently.
Now, Dan, has there been one or a series of different issues that you've seen contractors dealing with at different stages in terms of volume or the size of their organizations?
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, when I developed my marketing programs, I would actually break them into levels of annual sales. I would prioritize what was important to a young company or a growing company, a company that was $1 million in sales to $3 million in sales. And the priorities in that group are completely different than the next tier and then the final tier. So I break it into 3 tiers. Your middle tier is where the contractor is very successful. That might be from $3 to, say, $10 million in revenue. They have processes down and they're growing. The challenges that they face are they've got to get a new facility at one point. They outgrow their overhead increases because they outgrow their means of handling the amount of work that they've got. So they have those challenges. And then the next tier, of course, are, as you mentioned initially, the big guys. And they're well-oiled machines at that point. So what happens with those big guys is, think about this. I always suggest a 10% advertising budget. Now, a smaller company or a company that's growing in market share, they might go up to 15% in allocated marketing budget per year, which means they're investing another 5% of what would be profit margin, back into their growth. And that's brand building at that point. But as that company grows, you picture that next company, if they're still allocating 10% and they've grown to a $5 million a year company, they've got a lot more advertising to kick in. They've got their ability to build their brand in that marketplace without increasing their advertising percentage really gives them a lot more to work with. So again, take it to the end degree. When you've got that huge company, they don't have to spend 10%. They could be at 5% and still have a large enough advertising and marketing budget to be able to completely dominate the media in their marketplace. So that's what, you can see that those tiers, and you could see how the challenges and the priorities would differ based on the annual sales that each company has.
One thing that I learned from you a long time ago, Dan, and by the way, it is funny you talk about this 10%, and I'm assuming you mean 10% of revenue, right?
Correct.
Is like we see guys all over the social media groups, and it's like, hey, business is drying up, and What are you guys doing for leads? And then after the comments filter through, you find out that they're just posting a few things on Facebook and that's it. And it's like, yeah, you kind of have to do more than that, you know. But one of the things I learned from you a long time ago is like, we all know in sales you visualize the funnel, right? The marketing funnel. But not only did you do very good at capturing leads, converting them, getting them sold, getting them installed, I also saw where you evolved and helped the bottom side of the funnel, which is kind of bell-shaped. And it's like, well, now you have those customers, you know, we have to keep talking to them, right? And it's like, we have to keep like engaging with existing customers because, you know, that reduces costs over the years. And like those ideas that you kind of came through and in making the sales funnel more of a sales hourglass, I guess that's my words, not yours, but like what were the big game changers there that you've seen across the country when you started working on it through marketing that way?
Well, it's funny. Well, yeah, you hit it on the head. That sales funnel, that communication with those customers is kind of becomes the poor stepchild. You know, that's what everybody.
Wait a minute, no, contractors call people back, and
they, you know, it's funny, and it's not just in the marketing side, the sales side, right? I mean, it's typical for a sales guy that say they're getting 2 leads a day. The follow up after 10 leads that week, the follow up is, well, you know, it's not that important to me because I've got 2 more coming the next day and 2 more the next day.
Yep.
So, you know, from the sales side, from the marketing side, it's huge to really create, you know, those processes. So my feeling is on the marketing side that we should have 4 ongoing outbound customer communication programs going all the time. So first one, we generate a lead. The lead doesn't set, right? So we call them back. We go in. Now we're talking about our call center pipe, right? The second pipe. So our call center pipe is our lead conversion pipe. So they take the call and don't set the appointment, or it's a lead slip that comes in. It could be an email, a form that's filled out online. They've got to follow it up, and they don't get that lead captured. Well, those throughout the year, all of those prospects are put into a database, and that's an ongoing effort. So we create a newsletter, and then that goes off to that audience. But that's only one of the databases. So the next one is that same lead is generated, but they do set the appointment. And let's say there's also a cancellation rate in there that we've got to deal with. Make sure that we get back to cancellations or save them. That's another program that the contractor needs to have. But let's say that, okay, it did run. The job ran, the lead ran, and they didn't sell the job. Okay, that's a second database. So now that's a second follow-up. Now you've got a different message, right, from the first message to the second message, but that should be an ongoing effort. And that ongoing effort should be multiple media. So it can be emails, it can be SMS, text messages, it can be phone calls. We've got to stay on top of each of these. So those are drip campaigns that happen. Okay, what's the third one? Well, the third one is we set the appointment, we sold the job, but we didn't sell everything that we could offer. So there's other services, other products that they didn't buy at that time. So that's rehashing, right? So now we've got a third database, and we're hitting them with, again, different messaging of the benefits of certain services that they didn't take advantage of. And the fourth one is annual maintenance. So the key there is every sold job, we want to get back in that home. We want to get back in that home every year. When we get back in that home every year, we want to lock that house up. So anything that ever happens, anything that ever occurs in that house is ours. That's our future revenue. But also, it's the ability to ask for referrals and to stay top of mind with them and to upsell. When we go in, we're looking for opportunities. We're looking for those things that they didn't purchase. So those 4, those are mine. Those are the ones that I really think make a huge difference when we can implement that follow-up strategy.
Now, Dan, everything you touched on, it all makes so much sense from the business point of view. But how many contractors are actually doing that right now? And how many of them are doing it well?
100%.
Well, you know,
that's what keeps staying in business, right? They're all doing it, right?
Yeah, right. Oh, my God.
By the way, I'm hearing this, and in the back of my head, I'm like, shit, are we doing that?
You know, it's funny. even those big guys, I mean, you're the little guys don't do it at all. So I can tell you right off the bat, those first two tiers that we talked about, almost nil. The third tier, the bigger guys, some of them are starting to, to do some. I don't think many are doing all four consistently as programs as they should. But some of them do have rehash programs, and some of them do have newsletters that go out. And not to say that even that second tier, they might not, send a newsletter out periodically. But again, what we want is we want to be as efficient as possible with all facets. So again, if you go back to my book, each pipe, which is a department that flows into each other, each one of those has these best practices that you want to implement. So that's the key. But the answer to that is no, not many at all. As I say, it's the poor stepchild.
Yeah, so a few episodes, we had a guy named Jeff from TrueCast Pro on, more of a service monitoring system, and he really framed up this idea that, hey, those callbacks are like $285 minimum. That's what the cost is per billable hour. And it was a big light bulb moment for, our 5 listeners and even myself. And obviously, those blocks went really well, like on social for engagement, because most people don't realize that. It's like, man, we got to go back. So, when we talk about this, the difference between a contractor not doing that and following up on these sets of piping flows that you're describing, Dan, and the ones that do, what are the number differences that you're seeing out there in the market?
Tradies, running your small business can be demanding. You got suppliers you got to work with. You're managing crews. Hell, you're chasing sales. It's a lot to take in. Listen, if you want to grow your business, you got to stop working in it and you got to start working on it. So that's where my friends at Foundation Rescue Supply come in. You're not just getting foundation repair products and waterproofing products and air quality control products. With their nationwide distribution, you're getting a partner who knows how to help you scale. And that's why I use them. The Foundation Rescue Supply team has industry knowledge that'll help make your life easier. You get the tools, the trainings, the systems that you need to move the needle. You want your sales team to close more leads? Done, because they have the proven process for that. You need your crews to work smarter, not harder? Done. Their installation training will get you out there and rocking and rolling in the field. With Foundation Rescue Supply, you're not just buying materials here. You're buying a better business system that they have helped create. And you sell more, you install more, and you grow your team. So the bottom line is this. You get best industry pricing, you get field productivity on track, and you get more revenue out of everybody on your team. So this is your chance to step up, scale up, and thrive. If you are ready to make that happen, head to foundationrescuesupply.com, check out their catalog, and speak to my friends, their team, how you can take beyond the products with your company with Foundation Rescue Supply.
Well, the way I look at it, and I'd put this into my trainings, actually lead off the top part of my trainings with this, and that is, what is your allowable cost per lead? What's the value of a lead for you? And I want them to think about that initially before we get into anything else. Just to your point, for that reason, is I want them to understand that you've already paid this. So when you generate a prospect, you've already paid it. So whatever that might be, $300, it could be more, depending on, it all has to do with the average sale and the company's closing ratio. So if you take those two factors, you'll determine what a lead is worth. So every time a salesperson goes to a house, whether they sell the job or don't sell the job, they're bringing back a dollar amount, right? So once the contractor understands that concept and they can look at their own numbers and calculate what their ADL is, average dollar per lead, then we go into these areas where we can talk about this. We can bring up, okay, what's the value of the follow-up? What's the value of converting that lead into an appointment? What's the value of getting back to these guys? Everybody thinks about, we need more leads. We need more leads. What can we do to get more leads in the house? Well, okay, yeah, we always want more leads, but what are we doing with the leads that we have? Are we maximizing leads we have? Are you letting them fall through the cracks because we're not implementing this, these follow-up programs? So it can be incredible. It can be, as much as 25% of their actual conversions can be gained by going back to what they're losing. It depends on how efficient they are initially. So if the company's more efficient, it won't be that high, but I've seen it that high.
Well, don't worry, Dan. I have none of those problems in my company at all. Like, we are prestigious at gathering every little penny from every little customer all along the chain. Yeah. This is what I hate about having good guests, Terry, because when they start talking about business, I just want to make sure I'm not perceived as a hypocrite out there in the market. Like, I'm literally taking notes over here like, are we doing that shit right now? Now, I do have KPIs and things like that I can lean on, and I'm glad you said allowable cost per lead. I want to come back to that, Dan, here in a second. But it's like, these numbers add up to massive amounts, and it's just trying to understand that. So explain to me the difference, and this is a concept that you introduced to me years ago that was super powerful. There's cost per lead, actual cost per lead versus allowable cost per lead. What's the best way to track those two and understand when to step on the gas and step on the brake?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a strategy that wrapping your head around it is the key for these guys. So cost per lead comes into our tracking, and that's hugely important, and that's the first part of my internet program is tracking the leads using dedicated toll-free numbers or local exchanges and tracking those leads. I call it the lead hive. So in my lead hive program, we capture all of these leads, and we know for each source, we know what that lead source is and how many leads were generated. Now we go back to what it cost to generate those leads for each lead source, and we come up with what you say is our lead cost per source. So it's going to vary, of course, based on what lead sources we're using. So we want to, as we trickle down and we dig deeper, our lead costs are going to go up on those lead sources. So that's where our challenge comes in. And that's why I go back to our 10% of our marketing budget, because at the end of the day, when the year is done and you add up all the leads that were generated, and then you look at how much money you've spent for all your lead sources, that number should end up being 10% of your spend. And so now we talk about allowable cost per lead. Well, our allowable cost per lead is based on our sales, right? So that tells us how much we can afford to spend on a lead. So we can't just go haphazardly, right, with these lead sources and generate leads and have cost per leads that are out of whack, because that's our profit margin, right? So what allowable cost per lead is all about is sustaining our profit margin at the end of the day, because I can't tell you how many contractors have grown. Sometimes they've doubled. A lot of times you get to a certain point where you're a $4 million company, and now your processes are really cooking, and you go from 4 million to 8 million within a year or two, and that just incredible jumps. But then they look at the profit margin, and the margin didn't jump. So how much did you help yourself to add all that overhead, to add those additional trucks, vehicles, and your margins didn't go up? So, this is the challenge, is if the margins didn't go up, we've got to look at our departments again, and we've got to see, okay, where did we lose our efficiency? Again, if we go back to our ADL, our average dollar per lead, and our allowable cost per lead, those are the two numbers that we have to really track and look at to make sure that we're falling in line. And one more point I wanted to make on allowable cost per lead. Let's say we have a 10% advertising budget, and let's just say we have $1 million to spend on, well, let's say for every million, we have $100,000 to spend. Let's look at it that way.
And by the way, I think that's helpful, Dan, because there's tons of $1 million a year contractors.
Yes.
And they're not spending $100,000.
That's right. That's right.
and it's like, hey, by the way, that's what you should be spending, or within reason.
So if you think about that, that's $8,000 a month, approximately, right, for $1 million company. Okay, and if you're a $2 million company, it's $1,600. So $16,000. So if we look at that, at the end of the day, if we didn't spend our 10%, let's say that we went through all of our lead sources and we generated, all the leads that we were generating, and at the end of the day, let's say we spent 8%. Did we help ourselves? Did we help our company? No, because that extra 2% was what was allocated for our 10%. That's our marketing to grow the company. So that means that we had 2% and it's to your point where people aren't spending it, that we could have built our brand with. We could have went after some of those more difficult, as I mentioned, as we come down that list, they get more expensive, the leads get more expensive. We could have gone after some of those more expensive leads. Why would we want to do that? Because those are brand building leads. That we might have been on TV. We might have been on, I've got a TV program, campaign program, where we go on the news in the morning and we just front load the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I've created an incredibly successful TV campaign, even for small companies, because you never listen to the media. You never, ever want to take a schedule that the media gives you because it doesn't work. It's too spread out. But with a program like this that I've done over the years, you can actually take that bottom part of that budget and you can expand your brand. So that's the key. And that's why allowable cost per lead is so important, because at the end of the day, you want your full 10% marketing budget to end up being at your allowable cost per lead, which means you've squeezed everything you can out of your marketing and you kept your profit margin.
Yeah. And that's perfect segue, Dan. And you started to flirt with this a little bit in your answer, but I want to drill down on this even more, because I'm sure you see this. I've seen this in the past. I see it in my own business, and it's like, whoa, time out, where it's you have an allowable cost per lead at $180 per lead. And then you go into a business and they're like, we're at $70 per lead. We're killing it. And then back to the pipeline, or the pipeline flowing, going through, it's like, yeah, that sounds great, but you're not converting them because they're cheap leads. And you mentioned something about TV and diversifying all those together. So expand on that when a contractor has a high allowable cost per lead, but they're not maximizing because they're only spending half.
Well, the biggest factor there is competition, right? We've got major competitors out there. And when you're talking about the little guys like you are, the 1 million, 2 million, 1 to 5 million, that's a sweet spot. And that's kind of, to be honest with you, those are the contractors I love to help, because the big guys, the $60 million guys, they all started there when we started with them. I mean, that's where they all started. So you can gain market share and dominate, a marketplace from wherever you are. So, those guys that are at that point, that are smaller and are growing that way, we don't want them to allow their competitors to dominate their markets. So to your point, if that's the scenario that you just provided, that means that contractor is leaving so much on the table, so much potential for gaining market share on the table, that he's just letting his competitors dominate the market. So my thing, I played college basketball. I'm very competitive, and I think you've got to have that competitive nature in business. And so that's what all of my guys, we want to dominate the market in their area. So, and to do that, you've got to spend your budget, because what they would have left in that scenario you just laid out, they would have left all their ability to build their brand off. So yeah, they got leads, and they got leads at a low cost. So that means that their margins on those jobs were higher. But what it doesn't mean is that they didn't build any brand growth at all. The awareness and the referral base is down from what it could be. And let's just talk about that for a second. For every referral they generate, it means they can double their allowable cost per lead, right? It increases their allowable cost per lead by twice. So let's say a company, a good successful company that has a good brand, they might have 50% referrals and 50% all the other lead sources, right? And they're riding that. Well, that's a beautiful place to be, because what that means is that I can spend twice as much on average in all of my other lead sources, twice as much with my same budget. So the biggest problem, in that scenario you laid out, is that they're not going to generate additional referrals. They're not going to have a brand that people know, and their competitors are going to eat their lunch.
So, Dan, you were talking about leads through television marketing, and there's plenty of home service contractors out there that I've seen, billboards, signs, and their name on their trucks. I don't always see people with TV marketing. How is that able to work for them, and what are you doing different?
Well, the reason you don't see that is because, honestly, it doesn't work. And when I say that, I mean by going to a TV station and having the salesperson at that TV station say, oh, I want to bring you on, and here I'm going to lay out a schedule for you. Here's your schedule. This is the reach. The way the TV and radio works is it's reach and frequency.
Okay.
So reach is how much audience is going to see or hear or view our spot, right? And then frequency is how many times they're going to view it. And the biggest problem with the schedules that the media provides is they have a huge reach, because that's what they're selling. Their selling point is we can reach all these people. But what we've learned over the years is that if you don't have enough frequency in front of any audience, they have to see you multiple times, right? There's that old adage, from Madison Avenue back in the day that, you have to be seen 7 times, right, before you somebody's going to trust you to be able to purchase. Well, it's more so on TV and radio. But what ends up happening is you go on a schedule, a contractor will go on a schedule like that. They'll run it for a few months. They'll lose their budget. They aren't getting returns. And then they go off the air. So that's why you don't see these contractors on there. However, what ends up happening is 2 tiers. One, if you work the program that I've been able to develop over the years that is successful, you go time slot by time slot, okay? Not across the board. So time slot by time slot, and start with the news until you're dominating the news. Start with one station, and then you can branch into additional stations in the morning, and you can branch into additional news throughout the day on each station until eventually you're dominating the news and the weather. So it's all about weather. And why I say news is because people tune into the news for the weather for that day, and we're tied to the weather. So it's a beautiful place for contractors in the foundation repair, the basement waterproofing, crawl space encapsulation, moisture control. I mean, all of those industries, and you can add in gutters and roofing and other industries as well. But these are the areas where the news and the weather is great. So if they can get started without breaking the budget, look at what it's doing to their brand. They're building their brand in a way that is completely different than we talked about before, social media, and our core advertising that everybody's doing digitally. I mean, we still have to do, PPC and social media ad campaigns and all of that, and blogs and influencers and backlinks. I mean, all of that's important. But when a company can get to that point where they can start to get on the air, what ends up happening is people that don't know you, haven't used you, will refer you. So that's why I say that referral base jumps. It jumps because let's say that somebody saw your spot on the morning news for over and over a few month period, and someone they know or someone in their family all of a sudden says, hey, the last rainstorm came in and we got flooded. They will recommend you because they've seen you on there, even though they've never used you. They don't really know, whether you're good or not. But that referral comes in, and again, now that's a free lead. You've paid for it through your brand building over the time. And again, lastly on this topic, I don't want to say everybody should be doing this. What I'm saying is going back to what we started with that 10% advertising budget. What I'm saying is at the end of the day, if you've calculated, and you do it month by month, but if you've calculated that, yeah, I've got some budget here that I can allocate, that's what you use. Because now you've started to build your brand, and you didn't go over your budget. You didn't go over your 10%, and you're still within your allowable cost per lead. So that's great. Now, it costs me a lot more for the leads that are generated on TV, but that's okay. I'm building my brand where everything's going to work better, and everything's going to be, all my advertising is going to be cheaper when people know who I am.
All right. So, Dan, we got to pivot. The Proven Pipeline Performance Program that you created, why should people use it? What are you taking them through? Take us through the deep dive.
Okay, so I developed this based on my book, and the book is developed based on all of the proven strategies that we've used over the years to build these companies into these 900-pound gorillas in their marketplace. So what I want to do is I want to help the companies that are on the way up, that want to gain market share, that want to dominate their marketplace, and I want them to be able to grow this way. So what I did with the book is I went through the different departments, and I broke out KPIs for each department. So that's accountability metrics for each department. And then what I did with the pipeline performance program is I focused on the marketing and lead generation portion. And it also includes consultation, so I can help to evaluate. So basically, as it flows, it starts with what I call lead Hive initially, right, which is the tracking. So it starts with the tracking, making sure that you've got a dashboard set up that is going to be able to record the calls, going to be able to track the calls. You're going to be able to use, again, dedicated numbers and dedicated domains to be able to allocate for each lead source that you want to track so that you know that it's accurate data going into the CRM. So here's what I learned over the years. Hello? Yes, where did you hear about us? Is not accurate. And that's the tracking device that almost every contractor uses. And I can tell you some crazy stories about, somebody said, I just sent you over a lead. They're going to call. Here's their name. And sure enough, they call, they answer it. They say, where'd you hear about us? And she says, the internet. And it was a direct referral.
Yeah.
So, and it's on and on.
Was it Al Gore's internet or which internet was it?
It's in a box.
The bottom line there is that people don't care. You care about that. They don't care about that. In fact, you're actually disturbing them, right?
Right.
They've got a problem, and the reason they're calling you is because of this problem, and they're not happy about it, and they don't care where they heard about you. So anyway, we start off with accuracy. So that's the first portion. Second portion of the pipeline performance program is my innovative internet marketing program. And that's been developed over probably more than 15 years now because we implemented it initially in the Basement Systems International Network and Foundation Sportworks networks and used it to create the success for all of those companies. And I call it the service area optimization. So instead of SEO, it's SAO. And that program is where we have proprietary technology that allows a contractor to go into a home, to be able to have content come from the home, every home they go in, and in the click of one button and filling out 2 fields, they're able to put in why did they call us? So what's the problem? And what did we propose? So that's the solution. And if you think about the problem and the solution for every single lead that's run is what people search for. So the search results match the content that's coming from each of these jobs. And the key here is that content gets disseminated instantly, real time, to the city page, the town that job was in. So all of these towns have their own optimized pages. And this is not like a typical city page where somebody optimizes a page, puts it on, and leaves it alone. This is content that's coming in daily, weekly, and it's all new content. And it's not content that AI is creating. It's not content that a marketing person or a web person is creating. It's content that's right from the actual job from that in the field. And then we also add a couple before picks in there as well. So now what's happening is that city page is being optimized through the service area optimization program, and Google is ranking those pages. So why is this important? Because if you look at where your office is as a contractor, it's generally not in the town that you are your top towns. So what I always suggest is take 10 towns. Take 10 towns that to start with that you want to dominate and focus your marketing efforts on those 10 towns. So this is the start of it. In those 10 towns, we're going to dominate all of the jobs that we do are all going to be populated in those towns. And think about somebody searching and they land on your site, and your site has if the town that they're in, they click on their town, and there's all this content of all these people that you helped in that town. And incidentally, all the reviews, all the 4- and 5-star reviews that are from that town are on that page. And then before and afters, there's a before and after module. So all the before and afters are on that page. And then there's photo galleries, which is case studies. So any case studies that were done in that town is on that page. So that's the second tier of the pipeline performance program. The third tier is we go into social media, content creation, content repurposing. So now we've got all this content that was created from the second tier, from the SAO program, and that all gets repurposed into our social media. So we don't have to make up content. We don't have to have somebody, a marketing person making up stuff or using AI to put generic content in. It's all real content again. It gets repurposed in the form of case studies and blogs, and that all gets put in, and that's our second tier. Our fourth tier is a combination of social media ad campaigns and pay-per-click. So this is basically paid digital advertising. And there's a whole program that for all of that. So we want Google PPC, but we also want Bing PPC. Why? Because oftentimes, somebody will buy a Microsoft laptop and it comes with that. So they're not going to go to Google to search. They're going to search right on their laptop, and that's going to be Bing search. So, we're able to generate, good return on investment for PPC through Bing as well. And then multiple social media platforms is key. The next tier is video. So YouTube. We want a huge YouTube channel for every contractor. And on that YouTube channel, we want two different types of video. We want community-based video and we want job-based video. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, job-based video is just like we just did. We go in, we take a couple before pics. Well, we also take our phone, hold it horizontally, and we just do a little 30-second clip of the problem that we faced in there. Just simply talk through it. And then that video gets sent to us. We post it on the YouTube channel, and then we link it back to the town that was in. So again, it's part of that service area optimization program, but it also creates that backlink and it builds our YouTube channel. The other part of the video that we want, it goes into our community program. That ties back into our 10 towns. So again, we have these top 10 towns and we have our city pages. Well, video from the community, anything you do in the community. So this is volunteer work. This is team building stuff. This is sponsorships. This is the Chamber of Commerce. This is maybe I'm in a fair or a parade and my company is there with the brand. And what I want my contractors to do is to co-brand their brand with the events brand in every one of these markets. And then do a little video of that, do a little still of that, and provide the content for it. And then we put together blogs for those community events, and they get videoed, they get turned into blogs, and then they get backlinked. So that's the next tier. The sixth tier is, we talked about it before, it's advertising, offline advertising. So that's our TV and getting started and building the brand. And then the last piece to the pipeline performance program is I will meet with the contractor every month, and we're going to go through the KPIs. So each KPI for each department, and we're going to go through the marketing strategy, and we're going to look for bottlenecks. And when we uncover those bottlenecks, it ties into solutions to solve them. So that's what I did. I consolidated 7 components from the book and from our programs and put them together to try to simplify the process. And that's the pipeline performance program.
So, Dan, hold on, time out. I got to call this out. So I have a friend, and let's call this friend Barry Timefelter. He's a contractor, but he's really trying to boost his contractor feet pics across the internet, and he doesn't know how to do it. I'm just joking. Like, where do you start? No, I'm joking. And by the way, Barry is a real guy. He's sitting in the studio right over there. But no, sorry, Terry. I had to tease you a little bit on this, but yeah, talking about contractor feet pictures. I'm about to get a contractor foot picture up my rear end here in a second after the show's over. By the way, Terry's like 6'2" monster of a guy, so he wins all the fights after the show's over. But the framework itself, I mean, I love the simplicity of it because it's not hard, right? Now, my wife told me the other day, she goes, it's not hard, but that doesn't mean it's easy, right? Like what she meant was like, it is not complicated, but it's not easy, right? It's just implementation and focus. Like, so how do contractors, like, obviously buying your book is the first step, right? But when they reach out to you, like, what's the first step they need to take to try to reach out to you and learn more about this and say, hey, how do I tweak these numbers? Where does that go?
Well, you're right about the simplification part of it. I learned years ago that it's very easy to add steps to something, right? And you're trying to explain it and you just add, I'll make it easy for you. I'll add a couple more steps. Well, that's not genius. That's the genius is how do you remove a couple steps? How do you simplify the process and yet have all the complexity in there? And that's the challenge. And this, I've been working on this for many years. I mean, this whole program has been developed and honed over the successes, and seeing failures, right, over the years. So what I tried to do with these 7 steps, and we've touched on a number of them just, randomly through our conversation today, but what I tried to do is just that, is simplify them so that you can see there's categories. What am I doing? Am I doing something in all these categories? Or one of these categories I might not even be doing anything in? So, within the categories, within each of those 7 breakouts, I mean, they all get complicated, like you're saying. I mean, there's the whole book talks about, the whole marketing section of the book talks about all of those. But it gets overwhelming. If you're trying to help somebody, you've got to be able to figure out what the priorities are, where they want to start, and what are they doing, what aren't they doing, and what necessarily should they be doing. And it goes back, Terry, to your question before about what size are they, right? So, what size are they is going to determine how much they should be doing within each of those categories. But the way I looked at it is that I broke it out because, as you say, a $1 million company that's growing and wants to get market share, they're going to have these same 7. They want to implement something in those same 7 categories. The same thing as a $60 million company is going to be doing a lot in those 7. So that's the key. This is primed and honed to be able to work with any size contractor.
So Dan, we're coming up on time, and one thing that we always ask our guests is to talk about a time they've screwed something up so bad that they can now brag about it. And Will, and so some of his screw-ups. And
Don't throw me under the bus here, Terry.
oh, the bus ran you over a long time
I
ago.
know I showed up with the shirt today, but I'm comfortable. I've got that summertime vibe, sir.
But is there something you've done that you can now look at and be like, yeah, I learned a lot from it, and I'm proud of it now?
Well, this is kind of one of those foolish ones that, you hear that people have done. It's kind of a blooper is kind of what it is. As Will was saying, I've done a lot of trainings, 2-day trainings for marketing and call capture, lead generation across the country, with hundreds of attendees over the years. I was doing one, and when you do these trainings, you're mic'd up, right? And you've got lavs. So it goes in your back pocket, and then the wire runs up your chest, and it clips here. Of course, when you take a break, you've got to remember to turn that lav off. Yeah, and 99% of the time I did. But there was one time when I didn't even know I left it on. And of course, you take your break, and where's the first place you go when you take the break after a session, right? So right to the men's room. So I'm in the men's room and have no idea. People are in there, you're talking, and there's all the noises, of course. And then I get back out, and I come back into the session. And when I looked down, and I realized, oh my God, it's on. It's been on through the whole time. And so all I said, I just looked at everybody and said, I did that, didn't I? And everybody just started laughing. So that was, that's as embarrassing as it gets.
Yeah. Well, hopefully nobody stood up and said, like, hey, Dan, do you have a prostate problem? Is everything okay? Like, is the flow going?
Exactly.
But you know what they say, like that movie, Ricky Bobby, did you piss excellence at least,
Yep.
Dan? Yeah. And especially in 5-point surround sound, it must have been great. And we didn't talk about this today, but you know, you obviously speak at a lot of conferences. You've done that for years, and you've got this framework. You've got your book. You've got your nonprofit. We didn't even get into that today. But how does somebody get a hold of you and learn more about your offerings and your consultancy and all the things that you're doing for contractors? Because this has been insanely helpful today.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate, having me on. It's great to talk. I mean, this is what I'm passionate about. So I love to talk about helping contractors and what they need to do to grow. And so, yeah, I'm willing to talk to anybody that's interested. The one stipulation is the companies I work with, they have to want to grow. They have to be passionate. They have to want to gain market share. That's the key, because otherwise it's not worth the time. And I say that because there are contractors that are just happy with where they are. They're comfortable and they're making a good living and they're comfortable. That's fine. That's not really the niche that I'm looking for, because again, it goes back to that competitive nature. If you look at Global Growth Networks, I mean, that's kind of the hub for most of my properties. And I have a number of businesses and, as you say, a nonprofit to help young kids. American Dreams Realized is my nonprofit, and that helps young entrepreneurs. And I don't have to be young in age. They can be young in coming into the entrepreneurial world, and I want to help them to do what they love to do. But Global Growth Networks is the core. So the website is globalgrowthnetworks.com. So that has all the different disciplines there. And you can watch some of my podcasts, and you can see, the different sites. My email is dan@globalgrowthnetworks.com. So email me. I will get back to you, and we'll schedule. On the website, there is a QR code to schedule an appointment with me. And that's probably the easiest and best way to do it. I know that's what you do as well, Will, and that seems to be the most efficient way, but I'm happy to talk. My cell phone's on there as well, and text me. That's the easiest way to get me instantly. And I text all day. Those are the best methods to get me. And I'd be happy to, have a consultation and go through, your own company's KPIs and where things are, just to give you a sense of what you need and how I can help you.
Yeah. Well, and I've seen you do this for other folks where it's just even from a curiosity / bottom of your heart perspective, where it's like, yeah, let's just go through it and see if you even need my help. And I love that about you, Dan. You've just had so much experience in the industry. Love what you're doing. And also, we need to have you back to talk about your nonprofit. I love this. Dan, or Terry and I have talked about this with one of our friends, Ben Bigelow at University of Oklahoma, about like, hey, there's a bunch of folks coming out of the college and the workforce that they don't want to work for somebody. They want to start their business. So we need to tie that in a separate conversation. Dan, love it. But otherwise, appreciate what you're doing for our industry and our network. Barry. Sorry I gave away your business idea. But now you've got somebody to help you take your construction person's feet pics national through correct marketing. And just be sure that you have to select 10% marketing spend on average. Keep that going. But Dan, we appreciate you. Terry, appreciate you. To all you listeners out there, I know we make the joke of 5 or 6 of you, but we have a blast with you guys every week. We've got a great season coming up for the rest of this year, and I'm looking forward to bringing in all sorts of cool stuff. If you have any questions, comments, anything, hit us up. And otherwise, we will see you next week on Beers with Contractors. Cheers, guys.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of Beers with Contractors. We hope you enjoyed our chat as much as we did. Before we say our final goodbyes, a friendly reminder. Beers with Contractors encourages responsible drinking. If you choose to enjoy a beverage during our time together, please do so in moderation and only if you're of legal drinking age in your country or state. Furthermore, the advice and insights shared in this podcast are for informational purposes only. Always consult with professionals and experts in your field, and be sure to follow local laws and regulations regarding licensing and permits. We're here to help, entertain, and inspire, but your safety and compliance are important. So, as you head out into the world of construction and contracting, remember to build responsibly and make decisions that stand the test of time. Thanks for joining us today. We'll catch you on the next episode of Beers with Contractors. Until then, cheers to your success.